Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trucked Before. This time, Rascals. Yeah, it's not just me and Jimmy-Jerome and Keith. Rascals on It's All Been Trucked Before. But you want to check out Rascals? Check us out on Facebook. It's All Been Trucked Before. Support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/IABD. Go there, check it out. Support us. Get the bonus content. And you can see how rascally we are. Just like these guys. Rascals. It's All Been Trucked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We're here to talk about Rascals. What are your first impressions of the episode?
As usual, I like the weigh in on whether or not I remembered having seen this before at some point. And this one I don't remember at all. I think this one and the next one, I don't think I remember having seen it when it originally was on. Which, lends itself to the theory that I was probably seeing things just in that rerun stage of a summer or, not quite syndication, but you know what I'm saying, around that time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one, they probably did. Perhaps there's a reason why they didn't choose to broadcast
Repeated a lot.
Yeah, but the premise just seemed ridiculous at first, and I think I ended up being more entertained than I would have expected. I'll say that and leave it for the rest.
My impression is, if you watch the counterclock incident from the animated series and then you watched And the Children Shall Lead and thought, hey, what if we mash these two not good episodes together? What would we get?
Something better. That's how it works.
Or perhaps not. And that's what we will discuss today on It's All Been Trekked Before.
I would definitely argue this is better than And the Children Shall Lead. I'll say that right now.
And the Children Shall Lead used to be my least favorite, but I think on our rewatch, I might have changed my mind, but it's still down there. It's still not good.
This is better than that.
I think
Counterclock, I don't know. I'm a little more on the fence there.
By itself, maybe. Smushing them together, maybe not. But I will say there are some good, interesting moments here. But overall, I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah, it's not one of their stronger episodes, in my opinion. I didn't think it was terrible, but it wasn't great. Season 6 is continuing to leave us a little bit disappointed, but let's jump into the episode.
Sure.
The beginning, Picard had a visit to a fascinating planet with 3 women he doesn't usually travel with, coincidentally. I mean, I was trying to figure out, and he's totally awfully lecturing them on archaeology, and they're bored and not into it. But I was trying to figure out why this group was assembled. Picard clearly went to the planet for the archaeological reasons. Guinan expressed that she thought it was the most beautiful planet in the galaxy, so she wanted to go. Keiko obviously had plants that she was studying there, and she's a botanist, so that makes sense. So I guess Ro was just their chauffeur.
Seemed that way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the episode starts out strong because I'm like, oh, I like this collection of people. This should be interesting. Were they on shore leave?
It sounded like it. Yeah, it sounded like it wasn't official duties or anything.
I don't know why in my mind I'm like, well, why would Guinan need shore leave? But I guess if you're running 10 forward all the time, you need time away.
Yep, absolutely. So
the official headline will be that Steven thinks that bartenders never need to take vacations. We'll run that as the promo.
Yeah, we do get an interesting tidbit in this sequence that Guinan's dad is 700 years old, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we knew that she was a few hundred years old, but that's a clue to her age because obviously she's not older than her father. I don't think. I mean, that would be a real weird alien. So
we all knew something was going to go wrong with the shuttle, right? From the get-go.
Of course. If you're on a shuttle, something's going to go wrong, generally.
So when they get jostled by the whatever they pass through, I wrote down they're all listening to a different song because they were not all jostled in the same manner, side to side. Some of them were up and down. So again, it was a weird phenomenon they went through, but they were not listening to the same song.
So Brian, of course, does an emergency beam out. He's in charge. So we could say this whole thing is his fault, really. He mentions there being a 40% drop in mass, which I guess makes sense for kids.
Yeah.
They're 40% less. But it was interesting. I thought that their clothes shrunk to match them.
On the transporter platform, Guinan's clothes are hanging off of her, and I think maybe Keiko's, and maybe Rose, but Picard's are not. And then by the next scene, they're all as reading on our fashion, and so they said, oh, they must have gone to the replicator and got the same exact outfits tailored to match them. As soon as they cut to it, and it's the kids, I wrote down, oh, Christ. Oh, boy. Here we go.
Yeah. I wondered if there was going to be some sort of explanation. Maybe somebody could have retconned something about the outfits and the material, the kelp or whatever it is they use, doing some sort of adjustment, or maybe the pattern buffer did something. Who knows? But
the science didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fake science, obviously, but
right.
It just was like, well, their minds are fine from what we scanned, but their bodies are prepubescent or whatever they said.
Yeah.
But why did Picard grow hair?
Ooh, that occurred to me too. And I thought, comically that would have been funny. But if you think about it, yeah, that is.
Well, I will say with the mini uniforms or mini versions of the clothes they're wearing, it helped me take them a lot more seriously than if they put them in the two-tone of the same color child jumpsuits that we saw all the time.
I think I agree.
What
if it had been the actual outfits draping off of them? What then?
That would have been better. Right? At least at the beginning until they got something else, until they adjusted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
My note at that point was going to be, I think I wrote it, this is going to be comedy gold. And it's not necessarily whatever was going to happen in the episode as much as I was anticipating like the oh Christ reaction from Steven and so forth. There's just our idea of like, what is it? Just, I felt like this is going to be something that's you guys are going to rip apart for the accurate performances. And it makes for a good like podcast episode. This is funny, but we'll see.
I was just gonna say, I thought the kids did a pretty decent job. They had a lot of the mannerisms down.
I did too. Actually, I rewatched some of it today. Just like when I was very tired when I watched it last night. I'm like, did I miss something? And I don't think I did, but and I didn't watch it all the way through again. But I was just like, you know what? Yeah, you know what? I'm okay with the kids. I think the kids are all right. The Picard kid is great, and he played his nephew in Family.
He did, yes.
The young lady that played
that was David Birkin who played Picard, and he had the facial expressions of Picard down, and every line he delivered, I could totally see Patrick Stewart delivering it that way.
I thought his syntax, I think I'm saying that right, was good too. The way he his pauses and everything were like. It's one of those.
I would say cadence, maybe.
Cadence. That's what I'm looking for. So let's talk about him, but I do it every week on this podcast. Woody Allen, all the different people that have played him later in his career, when the part was for somebody younger than him, but it was still Woody Allen essentially. The ones, and I always say Kenneth Branagh, I thought did the most amazing job. Where the first time I saw it, I didn't notice it, but the second time I watched the movie Celebrity, I'm like, oh my god, this is the best version. He is nailing everything, but. It's a perfect impersonation without doing an impersonation, and I thought they did a good one. The young Guinan, that her whole career was playing young Whoopi. She played the young Whoopi.
Was Isis Carmen Jones?
Yeah, she played young Whoopi in Sister Act, and then that was it.
Wow,
Little Dolores, yeah.
Interesting.
I assume. Well, I don't know which Sister Act. It comes first on IMDb, and movies take longer to film, so I would imagine they got her because of Sister Act.
Yeah, you're probably
right.
They
just copied.
Yeah.
Those are her only 2 credits. She had the gravitas of Whoopi down, even though she was being silly.
A decent, a pretty good like voice for it. I mean, for lack of a better word.
Well, with her and the Picard kid, I was like, is there some kind of ADR going on here? And I know it wasn't, but it was just like that. They're doing a really good job with it. And then I love the row.
The row I thought was the weakest of them. That was Megan Parlin.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what are you really going to do with her?
And I think, but the only line of hers I wrote down was, what the hell am I supposed to do now? It made me laugh and I loved it. I'm like, and she delivered that line well, for sure. But
she was best known for a television series called Hang Time that she did in the later 90s.
yeah,
104 episodes, and then second best for this role. She's only got 20 credits, so it doesn't look like she's still active or anything. But yeah, she was the one that didn't quite gel for me. But I do think Michelle Forbes was probably the hardest one to get right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to say about the Picard kid, I did not recognize him as Renee, and I think it was just the totally different hair that really transformed him. And we should talk about young Keiko O'Brien, Carolyn Junko King. I did think she's best known for this role, according to IMDb. She only has 3 acting credits. One of them was in the movie Three Ninjas Kick Back, playing Mio or Mayo. She also directed 6 episodes of a TV series in 2006, so I don't know what that's about. Doraemon. It's an animated kid show, looks like.
I've heard of it, yeah. All right.
So I thought she was annoying and awkward, but I feel like that Keiko can be annoying and awkward, and she matched it really well. Like, I like Keiko O'Brien, don't get me wrong, but there's something about her that always feels a bit annoying, and she perfectly matched it.
I agree with it. We're jumping around. The scenes with her and O'Brien, those were the most like, what the hell are we going to do now? The most uncomfortable, like,
yeah.
I was trying to get, because which this goes to my next note, which was somebody's like, well, we need to have a cure. And I was like, do we? Somebody called this reverse big. I would not want to go through, and this gets into some of my other issues in the episode, but I would not want to go through junior high again. But I don't know why they treat them like they're, well, I know why they treat them like they're 12-year-olds, because they look like 12-year-olds. But if their brain isn't a 12-year-old, then
it's hard to get it's still hard to get your mind. It's
right.
Reflexively. I think they overdid it a bit with Miles going, oh, be careful with this, be careful with that. You know, that kind of like, oh my God, your body is going to be so we're getting at there. But at the same time,
if their daughter was a little older, it would be more understandable, I think. Like if he saw Molly in Keiko, because Molly's still so young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that whole scene awkward. Of course, it feels wrong, but I didn't feel like O'Brien was compassionate enough. I don't think he needed to wait for Molly to cry to give Keiko a hug. No, you're not going to engage in anything more adult than that, but you can still give her a hug. Now, I mean, obviously, Molly doesn't understand, but we did miss the scene of Keiko saying, you did this to me. This is your fault, which should have happened.
All right.
Since he was at the transporter controls.
Let's not zip past this so quickly, because
no, I've got more notes about the
my note there, because immediately I jumped. Again, speaking of Woody Allen, when they come to this scene, the joke pops into my head of we're gonna have to. Miles is gonna have to put on some kid. Oh my God, kid gloves. I didn't. That phrase didn't pop in my head at kid gloves. Anyway, I didn't
even think of that Woody Allen aspect of it.
I was surprised they went to it. I thought I was just gonna have to joke about it, but they went to that elephant in the room pretty quickly with her, caressing his arm that way, and like you think, okay, sure, she's doing that for comfort or whatever, but his immediate response was, you know what, I'm gonna have to take a beat here and make sure that we have some the boundaries in place. The optics of this is just really weird, and they addressed it. I mean, they didn't like say it letter for letter, but they were getting at it.
The conversation we're having makes me think of this song by Big Audio Dynamite 2 from the album The Globe called "Innocent Child," where essentially the guy's he knows the woman in the world now, but he's like obviously she's been through some stuff, as we all go through. And, he's like, I wish I would have known you as an innocent child. And that's not in a physical sense at all. It's just like, at one point you were this, we are all these little innocent children. And I really like that song. It's very sweet, especially for Mick Jones from The Clash to do, to me. No disparaging. I really like Big Audio Dynamite too, and I love that album. But that sort of makes me think of in the sense of, but there's that awkwardness. But on the other hand, I think it would be fascinating to be, obviously we've seen pictures of of people we are involved with as children. It's like, oh, you were very cute, and there's not there could be a creepy level to it, but I don't feel one. That relationship does both those things. But I felt his discomfort. But I'm with you, Jimmy. That they're the one going through something, not you. Your thing is secondary.
Yeah, and that's the thing there. Yes, if they remain this way for a long time, the sexual aspect is going to come up. And I want to talk about this like adults, not as creepy immature children. Trying to put myself in Miles O'Brien's shoes. And I feel like that's the best access I can get into this moment. You know, it would be very weird and awkward to have adult relations with somebody that looked 12. On the other hand, he did marry her for more than her looks. He married her for a personality and a package, and mentally and emotionally, she's still that. And so I feel like had there not been a way to reverse it, you can't reasonably say, well, you have to wait 10 years before we can be intimate again. You'd have to be able to work through those issues for her. I mean, if you're in her shoes, you don't want to be told, well, you can't do anything for 10 years because you look too young.
Right.
And give them 10, 20 years, it's not going to matter. It's that awkward period of how society is going to look at you. Yeah. And it would be very tempting anytime you're like in public holding hands to immediately say, hey, it was a transporter accident. She's actually my age. And you have to try to get over that self-consciousness too, because honestly, what's most important in the relationship is the two of you. And because she is emotionally and mentally fully mature, and she's not just and this is not licensed for somebody to say, well, this 12-year-old's super mature, so that's fine. Right. No, this is totally different. This is somebody that's lived those years of experience. I think at that point, O'Brien has to just find a way to get used to it and be there for her or end the marriage, which on a certain level, I can see that as being understandable, even though that would be heartbreaking, but it's not like she's going to go hook up with another 12-year-old because that would be equally inappropriate. Right.
So I've got
the big scenario there.
I've got 5 things to say now about all this, and this is going to be challenging to see if I can get all of them. There's one very direct correlation here. Have either of you seen Invincible season 1?
Yes.
I will say that there's a character within the series where a quandary like that comes up, and they explore some of that. I think you would find it interesting, not just for that, but it's really cool how they handle that. I'll leave it at that. The audience knows what I'm talking about. So,
and I think the tone of that series supports that idea a lot better than the tone of the Next Generation would.
Certainly.
I still think it could have been handled with more care, and I was cringing based on the way it was handled, even more so than the situation that it was depicting.
Okay, so that's 1 out of 5. Let's see. Stephen was hinting at something, the idea of living your life over again, which is something I've been thinking about a lot this year. Recently, I found out that I had ADHD pretty much my entire life. Been reevaluating a lot of things that happened, choices I made. What could I have done differently? And also, coincidentally, I would say this calendar year, 2022, I got a lot of health things figured out, and I feel like I'm in much better health than I have been for quite a while. Feels like I'm being given a second chance in a lot of ways. And for other other things that I'm not going to discuss right now, everything is sort of coalescing in a certain way where it's weird. It's like I'm being given this opportunity to do things over again in a certain way, and we'll see how that's going to go. And I think that you wouldn't necessarily have to go back if you get your body, and you don't have to go back to high school or academy as Beverly was kicking around. But there is that idea that maybe you could do some things, or at least you would have another opportunity. The thing with what was his name from The Clash you were saying?
Mick Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Number 3. I thought about that before with Marianne, and probably a couple of other people I've dated in the past. You get to talking about past traumas, and it's not necessarily like you want to go back and be with that young person sexually or something, but it's like, what if, number one, what if we could have met sooner and avoided some of these things that have happened? Or what if I could have protected you from this, that, or those sort of things, being able to see someone in that sort of innocent state. And again, it's the whole doing things over again. What would your life be?
Yeah, along those lines, my wedding vows with Colleen were along the lines of, I think lots of wedding vows go along those lines. It's that whole line of when you meet the person you want to spend your life with, you want to start immediately or whatever. And, so the joke was, I wish, I want to spend as much time with her as possible. And I was trying to figure out how to do it. But if I got in a time machine and went back 20 years, that just makes things worse. That creates a Keiko O'Brien situation. Yeah. And then, I just decided, well, I've got to live until I'm 94 or whatever. Right. But this would actually solve it. If they could turn back 20 years and keep my brain the same, this is the solution. So I
Would Colleen be okay with you suddenly looking 12?
32, yes. 12, no. She does think I look cute when I was 12. She would be the only person, but I don't think she'd be okay with that.
The series United States of Terra. I don't know if you're familiar with that or if you've seen that
Yep.
before. So there's a married couple. You have one of them who has alternate personalities, one of which is a very young girl. Body's still the same. We don't know. So what I mean, was that even a moral quandary? I thought that was when they brought it up in this series. I was like, really? I don't know. That doesn't seem to make as much sense. But there, you mentioned that they were emotionally the same. That's something they didn't really quite explore. Their body has actually regressed. Would they still have the same emotional maturity because of hormones or whatever else? Would they even still have the same types of needs and desires and so forth?
When Crusher was giving her scientific mumbo jumbo at the top, I thought she was going to give that because I thought that would have given them a little more cover, because she says, well, their brains are fine, and the bodies, but we don't know what's going to change. We don't know. It's like, all right, then I think you're overreacting. And I thought she was going to say, but they're, those hormonal things are happening. They're going through those changes again. And, it sounds like, the reason Tilly could be present, because women have periods once a month kind of a thing. But I think that there's a legitimate thing, hormonally for teenagers or whatever. And if it was that kind of thing, I still don't know that would disqualify them from.
No, I think you're right. By the premise we had, the hormones would be a factor, but I think they'd be better capable of handling the hormones at their age. Yeah. And, there are adults that have hormone imbalance problems. There are women that go through menopause and their hormones get crazy, or pregnancy. So I don't feel like...
You have low T?
Yeah. So I don't feel like that's a reason to disqualify them from anything.
I agree. I thought Crusher went, and she's not my annoying for the episode, but I thought Crusher went from, oh, their brains are fine, but I don't really know what I'm dealing with. It was like she was so confident that their brains are fine, the bodies are here, and then the next breath she says, but we don't know what's going to happen. And then the next breath she's like, I don't think you should be running the ship, Picard. And it was like, wait, whoa.
That really bothered me because she said this could affect your mind, but why not wait and see if it affects his mind before you relieve him of duty?
Right. Like, there's a difference between let's see what develops and waiting too long. You've got time right now. Right now, the guy seems pretty sharp, and he seems pretty sharp. And I guess I guess there's a form of ageism going on in this episode.
Perhaps.
Well, and immediately the crew starts to rebel. Like Worf looks to Riker for permission to obey Picard's orders, and it's like, well, really, none of you are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I know Troy talks about some people will adjust, some won't, but it just bothered me because I feel like the utopian future we've been presented, these people would not be so quick to dismiss their crewmates and their captain. Yeah. And that felt out of character to me, that Picard was not allowed. Now, if you want to say we need to observe you medically, so maybe it's a good idea if Riker takes a lot of your duties because I'm going to need you in sickbay to be running tests and stuff, that makes more sense. Or it would make sense if Picard says, okay, well, you have these three to run tests on. If there's any concern, let me know while I run the ship because that's my job.
Well, and he says that. He when I rewatched it, he literally says like, okay, well, I'm going to go, I'm going to do that.
They should have agreed with that plan because that is a solid, logical plan. It's not likely that he's going to become mentally unstable, but the other ones aren't. Like, they'll have warning.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of things about that, too. Let's see.
Just you hate teenagers like Colleen does? Is that why?
Kind of, but let's go back for a moment. First of all, the thing I was thinking about before was specifically sexual maturity, as far as hormones and so forth. Like a 12-year-old, we were talking about those like marital relations. We don't know that they would be on the same page as far as that goes.
I wasn't ready to go I was probably ready to go at 12, but some people may take 13, 14, 15, but they're not going to take too long. I mean, they're going to develop sexually pretty quickly.
Right. Think about Picard and his readiness. So perhaps I missed something, but I didn't really see there being a transition from him saying, I'm walking out of this sick bay. First of all, it looked like Crusher still objected to what he was saying, and he just kind of left anyway of his own accord, and she's followed him out. But there's also, it didn't seem like the crew on the bridge was briefed in any way about what happened. So suddenly this kid just shows up and starts giving orders.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so it could be anybody. There could be a practical joke or something like that. And Riker kind of had to go, this is real. to warp. I think that's what was happening there. At least that was my impression.
That's a
good point.
And also, I think you both have made the point before in a lot of other previous episodes how they don't seem to exercise enough caution when you have something like an obvious threat comes on board or something happens. You're asking, so why aren't they being confined to quarters until something happens? If something had come up, if there had been some sort of crisis suddenly that required a mature, steady hand, and then suddenly we find out that he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so emotional." You would assume, why didn't they do that? But
I mean, again, I think the worrying about them being emotional, hormonal is going to extremes because you're not hormonal every day of your life. It's not messing up your judgment. And yes, if a crisis comes up, they may have to make adjustments. So if he gives an order that seems based on hormones or emotions, then I would expect Riker to do his duty and step in at that point. But when there's no sign of it yet, when you're just making supposition, I don't think it was fair to relieve him of command.
Well, the reason teenage hormones are tough or can take over is because it's a teenage mind, and you don't have the experience presumably these people have. So
true.
I think there was much more fertile. I hate to use the word fertile, but there was much more fertile comedy ground here to be mined if we were going to go the comedic direction.
Right.
So I think we end up having we get into it with Ro, her like, oh, my childhood wasn't that great. It's like, yeah, but Guinan trying to help her through that was interesting, but at the same time, it was like, then why is there any reason to stay trapped in that either? Because Troy does the same thing. She's like, well, it's a second chance at growing up. Isn't that great? Mm-hmm. Which is it or isn't it? I don't know.
I mean, as somebody that wants to live forever, if I'm suddenly 12 again physically, but not mentally. Yeah, I'm thinking I just got 30 bonus years essentially on my life.
I would sign up for that. I mean, totally sign up for that.
I don't know how my family would handle it. I don't think my wife would be very pleased. I think I'd handle it better than she would if our situation's reversed. But in my mind, I'm like, I get an extra 30 years to live. I'm taking it. You don't need to restore me.
Well, you look about the same age then. So there it is. No.
And this time I will not let myself gain so much weight. I'll stay in better shape, right? You'd get to do over some things.
You would think.
One other thing with Ro,
I probably wouldn't.
At the end, we don't see Ro come back to her adult self, Michelle Forbes self. They discussed the idea of having Ro choose to stay young. Since they knew they were losing Michelle Forbes, they kicked it around. Kicked it around might be overstating it the way it was said, but it was something they discussed, but they decided it was too crazy. Or something.
I thought they decided that actress just couldn't handle it.
That might be true also, that they were like, we didn't want to say that. So we'll just say.
If it was young Picard, it would be different. Now, I've got several alternate episodes, but one of mine was young Ro goes to Deep Space Nine and takes the role that Ro was originally supposed to take. And that's just part of her character that you build that in.
Funny.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, actually, that would have been.
I mean, another one of my alternate episodes is we follow up on Picard's suggestion to Troy if he goes back to Starfleet Academy and becomes Wesley's roommate while he's getting his second degree, which would have been a fun little spinoff or something too.
So I was not a fan of the Ro subplot, what they were doing with it and how they were doing it. But I'm realizing after some of the things I was saying, and as you brought it up here, I think that if they had been using a little bit more of what like our contemporary language, the whole trauma thing, if they had leaned into that a little bit more, if they had spelled it out, because I maybe it was just distracted me, but maybe they did do a decent enough job with it. The idea that she was unhappy because she was reminded, she looks in the mirror and sees, this is what my life was like when I looked like this. These are the things that happened to me. I feel helpless, whatever. Maybe if they'd gone into more detail about exactly what had happened to her during those times, it wouldn't have been as fun as the other things that were going on. But I think I would have bought it. I think I would have taken it more seriously, something. But you see what I'm saying? It's just if they had gone, if they had leaned a little bit harder into the drama of it, I think that it might have been more worthwhile. Yeah,
I thought it was just a passing thing. They just kind of like, hey, remember she had a bad childhood, so
yeah, she's so serious.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Whereas the Ro we know now is always wisecracking. That's why when they start off with, what the hell am I supposed to do now? I'm like, all right, let's have some fun with this. And then it wasn't that much fun.
Right.
I mean, it's not necessarily wrong to take a dramatic shot at it, but it just wasn't that dramatic. And just as we move on, I thought there were just a lot of false constructs. I know I say that a lot in here, but I just thought there was a lot of, well, it's either got to be this or that, and it's, well, you look like a kid, so you should go back to the academy, or you can do this and da-da-da, and then, but I also felt there wasn't a lot of urgency, because I think there wasn't. There was the, well, we got to take you out of command, Picard, but on the other hand, I was like, but we'll see what happens. We're working on a cure. So then they put the hat on the hat by getting the Ferengi in here and all that stuff, so...
I just had forgotten about that. It's amazing. Like I started.
I did too, Keith. Like and like I said, I was very tired when I watched this. I also had a lot to drink when I watched this. So this morning, as I'm running through it in my head, and I'm doing my research, I see the whole Ferengi thing. I'm like, was that this episode? So that's part of why I went back to rewatch. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, now I remember. Because I thought the whole Ferengi thing was just like way too easy. I mean, the way they got on the ship.
I guess they wanted to give him some emergency for the kid crewman to solve, and that was as good an emergency as any. But I would have rather spent more time exploring the ramifications instead of dealing with an emergency. I guess it was one of those things where we got to have action. The three Ferengi were played by Mike Gomez, played the Daemon, who played a different Daemon in The Last Outpost we talked about. Tracy Walter played Barrick, again, played a different Ferengi in The Last Outpost. I kind of wonder why they didn't just make this a sequel to The Last Outpost with the same Ferengi. And then Michael Snyder, who played Morda, played a different Ferengi in not The Last Outpost, The Perfect Mate. So 3 actors they brought back that had previously played Ferengi, but for some reason they made them 3 different Ferengi.
I can tell you why. The joke wouldn't have worked if they'd been familiar with the crew.
Oh.
The whole thing of like knowing who the captain was and et cetera.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they would have had to rewrite it. Like, oh, Picard's gone, Riker took over. Okay, I get that, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. They would have had to do something like that. It would have been easy to do, but whatever. I do want to mention while we're talking about guest actors, Hannah Haiti plays Molly O'Brien, the kid. This was her one and only next-gen appearance. We saw Molly born, but this is the first time I think we've seen Molly, as an individual. But she will play Molly for 11 episodes of Deep Space Nine. We'll see her quite a bit. She is the Molly that we get to know. I can't remember if we ever see another actress play her, but I don't think so, except maybe if I think there was an episode where we see her older or something. But she also played Steve Urkel number 3 in Family Matters, Family Matters episode.
Oh, what?
So, yeah, she's got 9. She only has 9 IMDb credits, but yeah, she played that.
I'd completely forgotten that the O'Briens had a child. I didn't remember it from Deep Space Nine or anything.
They have a second child on Deep Space Nine.
Huh.
A boy named Kiriyoshi. Anyway.
Nope, no point in watching now.
Because his name spoils everything about him.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a boy, and it's...
So back to the action. When the power goes out, did you notice that the lights were fine, even though all the power's down? The lights never even that bothered me a bit, because normally half the power's out and the lights are out, but this time all the power's out and the lights are fine.
They learn from their lessons. They have a generator. Somebody's riding a bike somewhere on the ship. The
kids' computer had a male computer voice. Is that because they thought Majel Barrett was too sexy a voice for kids?
Maybe it's to make a separation between or maybe she was busy. And they're around about the backstage reasons versus the story reason. I don't know.
I mean, she appeared in this episode as the voice of the computer, just not the kids' computer.
Huh.
It was just to make the distinction. It was more like a lesson plan rather than the actual computer, though.
Yeah.
I remember he said delete audio as opposed to mute audio, which was strange for me. Why wouldn't you just, did he just really just kill that entire program and ruin something? Or
next time the kids go to use it won't have narration.
Yep.
Alexander and the kids were playing and did not seem super affected by the situation, which I do think was kind of realistic for kids. Maybe not Alexander, because he is really young, even though he looks older and acts older. I did think it was super odd, though, that they used Alexander in their scheme and got him involved. I feel like that was purely we like this Alexander kid, let's put him in the episode more. I don't think Picard would have endangered him by letting him go into sickbay and stuff.
It's something I looked at called this Star Trek Babies or Star Trek Muppet Babies, and I think that plays into that, the whole Alexander thing.
When I was watching it, I thought that maybe that was another subplot they're going to go for with Picard respecting the abilities of children more because he was placed in the body of one or something, or younger. So yeah, since I am, in this body and I feel capable, I now trust other young people more now. But that's another thread they didn't really lean into. Yeah. So
no, they didn't go deep enough on things in this episode. The toy Alexander is playing with, don't toys usually get smaller? This one was honking huge. It was an interesting toy. I could see why the Ferengi was interested. It almost looked like it was a tool they would use for like a cleaning or like an automatic cleaner for the floors or whatever. Though, I don't know if you noticed, the Ferengi was chasing down the hallway and Picard went to the transporter room. Picard's like already working the transport controls, ignoring his remote control, and the toy's turning around the corner when the Ferengi picks it up, which I thought was a continuity error.
Possibly. Didn't catch it.
I know it was hokey. I enjoyed the scene of Picard throwing the fit and hugging Riker as his dad, and then the whole he's my number one dad, which was so awful, but it was fun.
I think I noted something like that. I can't believe I went for it. I was amused by that whole thing.
Yeah. Riker making up words to explain how the computer works to the dumb Ferengi. First of all, I didn't quite buy that the Ferengi was that dumb, since they were smart enough to take over their ship and they would have some familiarity with systems, but it reminded me of Kirk and the Carbonite maneuver, just making stuff up, and I appreciated Riker doing that. I just was expecting a moment the Ferengi to go, stop lying, tell me the truth.
I don't know. I bought them as the scavenger type savvy, where you can kind of.
It played on the Ferengi not being willing to admit that they don't know something.
Yeah, there's that, and there's also just you can kind of figure out how things work, but to a certain extent, but. This is a Starfleet vessel. This is an entire starship. And there's all kinds of complicated things you might not be familiar with. And this is a captain kind of throwing stuff at you. You know.
When they were capturing the Ferengi, why did they need to stick comm badges on them? Is this once again a thing where the transporter doesn't work consistently? Sometimes they need comm badges to move them. Sometimes they don't.
Could have been
and then Picard burst into his office and has his phaser on the Ferengi captain. The Ferengi captain's reaction is very odd, I thought. Like, he seemed to be giving up and defeated, when if he just thought it was a kid, he'd either be amused or respect the game, or I don't know, but his reaction just didn't seem right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the whole thing at the end where Ro was considering not turning back and was coloring in the classroom, I thought was very odd, and I just didn't buy it. I didn't like the Rose story, like you said.
I don't think, I mean, I know the idea was like, oh, now she's able to enjoy being a child or whatever. But it's like, okay, but that's not the Rose we want to hang out with. I want to hang out with the kid Rose that said, what the hell am I going to do now? I wanted that kid. I want to hang out because that's Rose. That's who I want to hang out with.
This is that halfway point. This is what I was saying before. If they had leaned harder into the trauma thing, and her getting a second chance at childhood, something like that. I think that's what they were trying to imply, but they hadn't leaned heavy enough into it to earn it at the beginning. I
guess if you go that thing of like, once you get out of high school, you're gonna look back on this and be like, oh man, I remember when I didn't have to work or whatever. Well, whenever it is you started working or had to pay your own rent and all that kind of stuff. But this was even younger than that to me. I mean, I had a paper route since I was in 5th grade, but that's neither here nor there. I also had a couple years where I didn't. So I guess this is probably the only time this has ever happened that anyone knows of. Otherwise, they would have been like, oh, this happened 200 years ago. But it seems like Guinan in all her years and travels might have come across something like this. But maybe not. Transporters, I guess, are a newer thing, or at least in this galaxy. But other than like coming out of the Mutara Nebula, I feel like the Enterprise never gets the drop on. It's always 3 ships dropping out of nowhere, and whether they're cloaked or not. Like, oh no, 3 ships, where'd they come? And this continues on Discovery and Strange New Worlds and all the new ones too. And it's like, I guess maybe because they're never on a mission that we're going to go attack these guys. It's always, I guess it makes sense from that perspective. But
again, to bring it back to pro wrestling, as far as it's
it goes back to that.
Yeah, it always does. When you do a construct of when you have the good guys versus the bad guys, we're the protagonists. You have to be at a disadvantage. You have to have that kind of like, oh my God, what are we gonna do to It's just you don't make it too easy.
Yeah, I guess it would be if the Enterprise and 2 other Federation ships drop in on a Romulan ship, and you're in the 3rd ship, and you're like, we're just waiting for them. We're gonna blow them out of the sky. Yeah, I guess that wouldn't be the most. I mean, in the middle of a galactic war, sure, but if it in the middle of
even then, no, I mean, yeah, it's well, that's why we're watching it for this.
So good.
Well, this episode did have quite a few hands in writing it, which might explain part of that incomplete directions. Story by Michael Piller, who by this point was the showrunner, Diana Drew Botsford, and Ward Botsford. Presumably they're a married couple. I don't know. Maybe the brother, sister, father's daughter. Who knows?
Coincidence.
Teleplay by Allison Hawk.
No relation.
Ward, this is Ward's only writing credit on IMDb total. Diana has a bunch of credits, but mostly as a producer. This is her only Star Trek writing credit, but she has other writing credits. Allison Hawk, who wrote the teleplay, this is her only Next Gen writing credit as well, which makes me wonder if she was just like a writer they hired for the staff and she wrote this one episode and then didn't work out. I don't know. But yeah, they all had a hand in writing it. The director was a first-time director. This was his very first directing job. His name was Adam Nimoy. You might have heard of him.
Nope. Another coincidence.
Obviously, son of the great Leonard Nimoy, Spock, spouse of Terry Farrell, who
could have been brother, could have been husband, could have been all kinds of things.
No, he's yeah, and he married Jadzia Dex, Terry Farrell from DS9. So he married one of the DS9 lead characters.
Okay.
But yeah, he directed this and one other Next Gen episode that we have not seen yet that'll come up. And then since then, he's directed The Outer Limits, Babylon 5, Murder 1, Sliders, Nash Bridges, The Net, Ally McBeal, The Practice, so many things, but never Star Trek again. Just 2 Next Generations, and that's it. He didn't do any other Star Trek. He does have that excellent documentary For the Love of Spock, which we'll watch later in our run of this podcast, where he examines his father's legacy. But yeah, I was a little disappointed to see he only got to do 2 episodes of Star Trek, though he clearly has had many directing experiences. So he never directed his wife in Star Trek.
Probably wanted to make his own way or something, I would imagine.
But he let Star Trek give him a start. So, I mean, at this point, Leonard Nimoy obviously is still alive, and so is Pohl. You think he called up Star Trek and was like, hey, my son wants to direct. Let's see what we can do. Or do you think it was less merit?
It was more like, hey, get him off this show. I know what he's gonna he's gonna ruin it.
Or less nepotism. I don't know. Yeah, alternate episodes. I gave you a couple. I really just, my idea was a Dookie Howser type show where you've got a young doctor, except with a twist that they're not mentally young. I mean, it'd be great if it was Bev, except I still want Gates McFadden to play her, just like younger Gates McFadden. I don't know. I
went with Teen Titans TNG or TNG the early years.
You know, they could cast a younger Dr. Pulaski into this story, and then they never would have brought back Crusher, and Diana Mulder could have left, which would have been sad. I'm just saying.
Sure. I enjoyed the at least the internal consistency, well, the pseudoscience of what they were doing, of explaining how the aging worked, and Crusher sort of discussing some of the possibilities. I'm trying to remember the exact her reasoning process at the time seemed fun, at least to me. Like, here's what could have happened, or here's what might have happened. You know, the whole thing.
Who is your annoyance of the week of Rascals?
The transporter. Sick of it.
That's fair. As annoyed as I got with O'Brien for his lack of compassion for his wife, I'm going to go with young Ro, just because I really didn't care for her.
What the hell is she going to do now?
Or her plot. Yeah, I'm really glad they didn't use the young one to continue the character.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, I'm going to go with Guinan. I thought that the whole thing was a little too heavy-handed as far as like
young Guinan.
Yeah, just I suppose young Guinan.
Do you have a problem with Whoopi Goldberg's performance?
No, it's not the performance. It's just the idea of what they were doing. You know, it was very well performed with what they gave her. It's just the idea of that kind of prodding at Ro the whole time. Oh, come on, Yeah. Now,
we do rank children on their annoyance factor. We are not going to separate out the 5 children that played a major role in this episode. I'm counting Alexander with the 4. Let's just give them an overall average. I know they don't all deserve the same score, but I don't want to spend 20 minutes on this. So let's give them an average ranking of annoyance.
I'm going to go with a 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a 3. There were some annoying bits, especially with Roe and Alexander. Sorry, Alexander. But overall, I really enjoyed the performances and stuff.
It's hard for me to gauge things like that numerically, but 3 is what popped into my head initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3.3 average.
Perfect.
Not bad. Not too annoying. Who are we going to have a drink with?
Well, obviously none of the kids, even though we could.
Well, young Keiko, of course.
Keith, that is so wrong.
I'm sorry. Just
that is so. I get what. I mean, I understand why that joke came about.
It would have been hilarious if young Keiko walked into 10-4 and was like, "Line it up." No, I need the real stuff. It's like, can I see some ID? Yeah, here it is. I'm 34. Serve it. So I will not apologize. I'm sliding back to my our old ways on here, or my old ways, I should say, that I haven't given up enough. It's with the Dorothy Hamill-looking Helms person. Christy Hayden's the actress. That's who I have my drink with. I love that hairstyle. So it's they called it on Fashion So a futuristic bob. She was a little more prominent.
What was the actress's name?
Christy Hayden.
Oh, I see that. Starfleet Ensign, uncredited.
Yeah, she was in 24 episodes as a background person, and then she is actually a musician. She did some stuff with the band Sparks, the LA band Sparks, that just recently had a documentary come out about them. She was a drummer for them for a while. And,
looks like she has a lot of production designer credits too.
Yeah, she's a little bit of everything. So yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, those aspects I would be fascinated to talk to Christy Hayden about this one.
Okay.
Not just look at her nice hair.
I would say adult row.
Adult row. Okay.
Yes.
I am going to go with the 4 child actors. We're going to have a root beer because
that's a good point.
Because I do want to talk to them about how they found the mannerisms, what it felt like to play these iconic characters, how nervous they were.
That's good.
Yeah.
I want to have a serious conversation with these 4.
Hey, your root beer can have vanilla vodka, just so there's.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But yes, I'm not giving the kids alcohol because in this case, I'm not talking about the characters. I'm talking about the actors.
Okay.
Because I would like to talk to them about this. I think this is so cool. They got to play this part. Anyway, ranking the episode. Let's go against last week's True Q. Better or worse? Also had a precocious youngster.
It's got to be worse than True Q. I mean, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed. Below that is Man of the People.
I mean, I quote unquote liked that one more, Man of the People more.
I'm surprised how close it is, but I think I do too. But I thought
you like Man of the People more.
I did, and I didn't think it would look that way. But yeah, I thought I would be like, oh, Man of the People for sure. I like more than this, but I don't necessarily feel that way as a reader. But I'm with Keith.
Interesting.
I am not. I definitely think this is stronger than Man of the People. Wow. I hated Man of the People. Hated it. I would much rather watch this again than Man of the People.
I liked it for different reasons, you know.
Okay. Well, you two. Below that is Times Arrow Part 2.
I can't.
You know what? I'll let you answer, Keith, since I think we know Jimmy's answer. Or I can put you on the spot and you have to decide. I think I just did.
Yeah, I think Rascals is definitely better than the 3 that we have. The Man of the People Times Arrow and Schisms. Definitely better.
Yeah, I like this better than Times Arrow, I guess.
I would have gone below, but that's fine.
You would have?
But it doesn't matter. Yeah, I didn't like this episode.
Yeah, you guys are dragging this down, in my opinion. Like, I would have had it higher. And Man of the People, if we get to the end of the episode and it's in the top 10 of 26, I'm going to be like, what the hell? Well, why do you have this episode up there?
This goes to my point, which is I think we kind of talked about, it's like this season doesn't feel strong so far. And I wrote down after this episode, are we in a season 3 of TOS stretch?
I don't think so, because Relics was great. Realm of Fear was pretty darn good. True Q was so pretty strong. So we've had, I think we've had 3 good episodes. I think this one is a middling episode to me, and then I'd say we had 3 bad episodes. Now I know you two disagree with that assessment, but that's what I would put it.
I would draw my season 3. I think some of these episodes feel like a season 3 episode, but I rescind that.
We have. I think this is certainly weaker than seasons 3, 4, 5 of Next Gen for sure so far. We'll see where we land. I do know there are great episodes coming up in season 6, so we're not like we haven't jumped the shark and the show's going downhill yet. There's still strong episodes coming, but yeah, the season 6 did not start out well, and I don't know why. I would be curious if what changed that made the beginning of this season just bad. Yeah. But not universally, but compared to where the last couple seasons were like, man, this show's really in its groove. It's so good. Right. There's hardly ever a bad episode. There might be 2 or 3 for the whole season. Season 6 just came out of the way early. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out.
Well, next week we'll probably have another good episode.
Next week, a fistful of datas or datas, whatever have you. While the crew is experiencing some much-needed downtime, Worf and his son, we have Alexander again, go on an Old West excursion. It says Old West, but it should say Ancient West excursion in the holodeck.
Oh, God.
Where they meet several versions of Data serving as the bad guy after an experiment in engineering goes wrong.
Not at all a spoiler. It just got...
it's true. It does spoil.
I'm really hoping we can do the edit where Steven says that. Maybe next week we're going to have a really good episode and we go right to that synopsis and just...
I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I thought this was much better than Rascals. But anyway, until then, live long.
Through the transporter and outside the transporter, and prosper.
And live long all over again.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?